Thanks, Bill. Welcome to the Sioux City Convention Center, the site of our Republican presidential debate, the first ever presidential debate in Sioux City here in northwestern Iowa. How about that? This crowd's fantastic. It's being sponsored by Fox News and the Iowa Republican Party. Besides watching us on Fox News Channel, we are being streamed on foxnews.com and heard on Fox News Radio. Now, this is the final debate before the January 3rd Iowa caucuses, the closing arguments for the now familiar 7 candidates on this stage. From left to right, former Senator Rick Santorum, Texas Governor Rick Perry, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, Congressman Ron Paul, Congresswoman Michele Bachmann, and former Utah Governor John Huntsman. Joining me at the big desk tonight, my Fox News colleagues Neil Cavuto, Chris Wallace, and Megyn Kelly. Now, our rules are similar to our previous Fox debates. 1 minute for answers, 30 seconds for follow-ups. If the candidates run too long, we'll politely remind them it's time to wrap up with this sound. After a long string of debates, we trust you all know the drill, and we won't have to use that sound too much. We also have, as I mentioned, a very enthusiastic crowd here tonight, and we welcome that. But we do have a limited amount of time here, and we ask you to honor the fact that we're trying to keep the valuable time for the candidates throughout this debate. Tonight's event obviously comes amid an extraordinary backdrop. The struggling American economy now further threatened by financial turmoil in Europe, gridlock on Capitol Hill, a real threat to world security posed by Iran, even as we pull the last U.S. troops out of Iraq. And we have received thousands of tweets and Facebook messages and emails with suggested questions. And the overall majority of them had one theme: electability. People want to know which one of you on this stage is able to be in the best position to beat President Obama in the general election. And that's the #1 goal for Republican voters, obviously. Speaker Gingrich, since our last debate, your position in this race has changed dramatically. You are now physically at the center of the stage, which means you're at the top of the polls. Yet, many Republicans seem conflicted about you. They say that you're smart, that you're a big thinker. At the same time, many of those same Republicans worry deeply about your electability in a general election, saying perhaps Governor Romney is a safer bet. Can you put to rest once and for all the persistent doubts that you are indeed the right candidate on this stage to go up and beat President Obama?
Well, first of all, let me just say to you and to all of our viewers, Merry Christmas. This is a great time for us to be here, and I hope that everybody across the country has a very joyous Christmas season. I've been around long enough that I remember at this exact time, in 1979, when Ronald Reagan was running 30 points behind behind Jimmy Carter. And if people had said, gosh, electability is the #1 issue, they wouldn't have nominated him. What they said was, he believes what he's talking about, he has big solutions, he can get the economy growing, he understands foreign policy, and he's the person I want to have debate Jimmy Carter. He carried more states against Carter than FDR carried against Herbert Hoover in 1932. I believe I can debate Barack Obama, and I think in 7 3-hour debates, Barack Obama will not have a leg to stand on in trying to defend a record that is terrible and an ideology that is radical.
Mr. Speaker, Governor Romney just yesterday said you're an unreliable conservative. Now, obviously, he's your opponent. He's your opponent. But even Iowa Governor Terry Branstad said today he respects you greatly, but he openly questioned whether you had the discipline and focus to be president.
Well, those are 2 different questions. The first, let me take them one by one very quickly. I have a 90% American Conservative Union voting record for 20 years. I balanced the budget for 4 straight years, paid off $405 billion in debt, pretty conservative. The first wealth entitlement reform of your lifetime, in fact, the only major entitlement reform to now is welfare. 2 out of 3 people went back to work or went to school, pretty conservative. First tax cut in 16 years, largest capital gains tax cut in American history. Unemployment came down to 4.2%, pretty conservative. I think on the conservative thing, it's sort of laughable to suggest that somebody who campaigned with Ronald Reagan and with Jack Kemp and has had a 30-year record of conservatism is somehow not a conservative.
And what about the concerns from Iowa Governor Branstad?
I think people have to watch my career and decide. I spent 16 years working to create the first Republican majority in 40 years. I spent years helping create the first balanced budgets. I'm the longest serving teacher in the senior military, 23 years teaching 1- and 2-star generals and admirals the art of war. I think it's fair to say that my commitment to disciplined, systematic work is fairly obvious. You know, people just have to decide. Part of the difference is I do change things when conditions change, and part of the difference is I strive for very large changes, and I'm prepared to really try to lead the American people to get this country back on the right track, and that's a very large change.
Now to my colleague, Megyn Kelly.
A similar question to you, Congressman Paul. You have some bold ideas, some very fervent supporters, and probably the most organized ground campaign here in Iowa. But there are many Republicans inside and outside of this state who openly doubt whether you can be elected president. How can you convince them otherwise? And if you don't wind up winning this nomination, will you pledge here tonight that you will support the ultimate nominee?
Well, you know, fortunately for the Republican Party this year, probably anybody up here could probably beat Obama. So, so the challenge isn't all that great on how we're going to beat Obama. I think he's beating himself. I think really the question is what do we have to offer? And I have something different to offer. I emphasize civil liberties. I emphasize a pro-American foreign policy, which is a lot different than policemen of the world. I emphasize, you know, monetary policy and these things that the other candidates don't talk about. But I think the important thing is the philosophy I'm talking about is the Constitution and freedom. And that brings people together. It brings independence into the fold, and it brings Democrats over on some of these issues. So therefore, I see this philosophy as being very electable because it's an American philosophy. It's the rule of law, and it means that, you know, we ought to balance the budget. It opens up the door for saying, supporting my willingness to cut $1 trillion out of the budget the first year.
Senator Santorum, no one has spent more time in Iowa than you. You have visited every county in the state. And yet, while we have seen no fewer than 4 Republican candidates surge in the polls, sometimes in extraordinary ways, so far your campaign and you have failed to catch fire with the voters. Why?
Well, I'm counting on the people of Iowa to catch fire for me. That's what this plan was all about from day one, is to go all 99 counties and do already almost 350 town hall meetings here in Iowa. We're organizing. We have a very clear message. That's the thing that's going to pay off for us in the end, that we present the clear contrast that really nobody else in this race does. We present the contrast of someone who's been a strong conviction conservative. You know where I stand. You can trust me because I've been there and I've done it. And I did it as a leader. When I was in the leadership, if you were a conservative and you had an issue that you wanted to get voted on and you wanted to get done in the United States Senate, you came to Rick Santorum because I was the guy fighting for the conservative cause when it was popular and when it was unpopular. Speaker had a conservative revolution against him when he was the Speaker of the House. I had conservatives knocking down my door because I was the effective advocate for the principles that they believed in. That's the contrast. We need someone who's strong in their political and personal life to go out and contrast themselves with the president and make him the issue in this campaign. And that's why Iowans are beginning to respond. They like the accountability. They like the fact that I've been there and met with them and believe in them to lead this country.
Chris Wallace.
Thank you, Brett. Governor Romney, I want to follow up on Brett's line of questioning to the Speaker, because many of our viewers tell us that they are supporting Newt Gingrich because they think that he will be tougher than you in taking the fight to Barack Obama in next fall's debates. Why would you be able to make the Republican case against the president more effectively than the Speaker?
Well, let's step back and talk about what's really happening in the country. What we're finding across America is a lot of people are really hurting. 25 million people out of work, stopped looking for work, or in part-time work that need full-time jobs. A lot of people in the middle class who've seen incomes go down as the cost of their living has gone up and up and up. The American people care very deeply about having a president who can get America right again. And all of us on this stage have spoken over the last several debates about the fact that government doesn't create jobs, but the private sector does. I spent my life, my career in the private sector. I understand, by the way, from my successes and failures, what it's going to take to put Americans back to work with high-paying jobs. I can debate President Obama based upon that understanding, and I'll have credibility on the economy when he doesn't. My successes include some businesses that were successful, like Staples and Bright Horizons Children's Centers and a steel mill in the middle of Indiana, some things I learned from, and by the way, some failures. I remember when the founders of JetBlue came to me and said, invest in us. I said, well, that'll never work. Kind of wrong. Now one of my favorite airlines. I know what it takes to get this economy going. The president doesn't. The proof is in his record. It's terrible. My record shows that I can get America working again.
Congresswoman Bachmann, no one questions your conservative credentials, but what about your appeal to independents who are so crucial in a general election? If you are fortunate enough to become the Republican nominee, how would you counter the efforts by the Barack Obama campaign to paint you as too conservative to moderate voters?
Well, it's very clear. In the last 5 years, I've won 4 elections as the first Republican woman ever to win out of the state of Minnesota. And I did that by attracting not only Republicans, but also independents and Democrats as well, because people wanted to know who could they trust. They knew that in me, they may not always agree with me, but they knew that I was a woman who said what she meant and meant what she said. And they respected that level of authenticity and sincerity. And they also knew that I was an action person, that I wasn't just going to sit on my hands. I was going to work and serve them. And that's what I've done. I've worked very hard in the United States Congress in the brief time that I've been there. I'm 55 years old. I spent 50 years as a real person, and now 5 years going toe-to-toe with Barack Obama, taking him on every issue from Dodd-Frank to cap and trade to illegal immigration to Obamacare, and I will do that as President of the United States. That's my proven track record.
Neil Cavuto.
Thank you, Brett. Governor Perry, by your own admission, you're not a great debater. You have said as much and downplayed debating skills in general. But if you were to become your party's nominee, you would be going up against an accomplished debater in Barack Obama. There are many in this audience tonight, sir, who fear that possibility and don't think you're up to the fight.
Well,
allay them of their concerns.
I want to share something with you, that as each one of these debates, I'm kind of getting where I like these debates. As a matter of fact, I hope Obama and I debate a lot, and I'll get there early. And we will get it on, and we will talk about our differences, which are great. I'll talk about what we've done in the state of Texas. I'll talk about passing a balanced budget amendment to the United States Congress. I'll talk about having the type of part-time Congress that I think Americans are ready for. And, you know, there are a lot of people out there, I understand it, you know, there are a lot of folks that said Tim Tebow wasn't going to be a very good NFL quarterback. There are people that stood up and said, well, he doesn't have the right throwing mechanisms, or he doesn't, you know, he's not playing the game right. And, you know, he won 2 national championships, and that looked pretty good. We were the national champions in job creation back in Texas. And so, but am I ready for the next level? Let me tell you, I hope I am the Tim Tebow of the Iowa caucuses.
Governor Huntsman, your campaign has been praised by moderates, but many question your ability to galvanize Republicans and energize the conservative base of the party. They're especially leery of your refusal to sign on to a no tax hike pledge. How can you reassure them tonight?
I think people, Neil, are coming around to finding that I am the consistent conservative in this race. They're coming around to find that I'm not going to pander. I'm not going to contort myself into a pretzel to please any audience I'm in front of. And I'm not going to sign those silly pledges. And you know what else? I'm not going to show up at a Donald Trump debate. This nation has been downgraded. This nation is on the cusp of the 3rd government shutdown. We have been kicked around as people. We are getting screwed as Americans. And I'm here to tell you, we're going to lead the charge in doing what must be done in addressing the 2 deficits we have. We have an economic deficit in this country, and it's going to shipwreck the next generation unless we can deal with it. And we have a trust deficit. People in this country don't trust their institutions of power anymore. We need to go to Congress and we need to say, you need term limits. We need to go to Congress and say, we need to close that revolving door that allows members of Congress to file